Welcome to Aspects of Design. Thank you for joining me today, and let's have a chat. We're going to be chatting all things PR today, isn't that right?
Very exciting. Yes, we are. Thanks for inviting me on, Nicola. Delighted to be here, and I feel very honoured to be one of the
Well,
greats and the greats.
well, I thought let's get you out from behind the shadows. Let's see the face behind the name and behind the podcast and all the things you do. So we'll talk about all of those things a little bit later. But first of all, I just wanted to ask you about you. How did you get into PR and how long have you been doing it? And then tell me a little bit about the company.
Gosh, well, it all started. I wrote a careers project when I was the equivalent of year 10 back in the last century, and I did this career project on I want to be a journalist, and yeah, I then soon figured out that actually getting into journalism wasn't where the money wasn't where the money was. It was PR, even back in the day.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so kind of met a number of people who worked in PR and saw what they were doing, because it was a relatively new industry back in the 1980s. And yeah, just thought, hang on a minute, this kind of profession, they want you to write, they want you to do events, they want you to be great communicators and get on with people. Well, those are all things that I enjoy doing. Maybe there's a job for me here. And I left university with an English degree, sort of kicked around a few kind of event management type roles. And then I went on holiday to Mexico, and I sat next to a chap who did the PR for the city of Guadalajara in the 1970 World Cup.
Okay.
And I listened to all his stories about Sir Alf Ramsey, Bobby Moore, and all those greats who toured out there, and thought, yeah, that's the sort of job that I want. Came back, mentioned that to a friend who said, oh, I've got a friend who's got a PR company.
And here we are.
And here
I
we
love
are.
it. I'm always fascinated to hear people's journeys, their stories. So I think you're quite unusual in that you've sort of gone into it sort of straight away. You know, a lot of people are career changers, but you seem to be sort of PR through and through.
Well, it was a few years. I mean, graduating with an English degree qualifies you for everything and nothing. And
I have
there's,
one too.
oh, you understand. And I think it does take a while to actually find out what it's going to lead you towards. So yeah, I mean, I did like I say, a few years in events and conferences, and then kind of serendipitous really that I fell into PR,
Hmm.
and it turned out to be the career for me. And I'm very grateful for those opportunities to get started, because well, careers were different back then. There wasn't the internet to find out or to research what you might be good at. It was totally different. So
Yeah.
yeah, and kind of the way I fell into PR is what PR is all about. It's about knowing people.
Absolutely. So listen, tell me about Wildwood, because that's, the reason I know you is I'm a BIID member, and one of the companies that Wildwood represents is the BIID. So yeah, just tell me about, so do you specialize in interiors PR or?
Yeah, the first agency that I worked for was in building construction industry PR, working for brands in that space. The second agency was a bigger version of that first agency, and then Wildwood was kind of born from um, looking at what the strengths of both those agencies were and thinking about bringing that into a perfect kind of agency, because one of them was very good on the people side of things and the other was very good on the strategic side of things. So um, I I actually partnered with a friend of mine, in fact, Tanya, who worked with me at that second agency. Tanya Houston set up Wildwood back in 1994. I joined her a couple of years later, and we kind of grew the company from there. So we're co-owners. We started off in building construction. It's one of our big spaces that we've always been in. And that's where we still are to an extent, although we've diversified into a number of other areas. And yeah, it's now a company of 20 people,
Yeah.
We're quite a sizable organisation for a PR company, and it's been a lot of fun growing the business to where it is now. And we started work with the BIID, gosh, back in 2012, which again is a completely, feels like almost a generation ago already. 8 years, and that came about. I mean, we're working with building interiors brands. Some of the brands that we represent being exhibitions and events, a lot of what the BIID does. We've also, and we still do, work with a number of trade bodies. And again, working in trade body PR is slightly different. Membership organisations demand a sort of different type of understanding to working with a typical brand or a professional services business. So yeah, that's kind of where it all started and where we are today.
Yeah, fantastic. And I mean, are there any other brands that you represent that you think, because obviously a lot of people watching this will be interior designers, interior design students, people who are just generally interested in interior design. So besides the British Institute of Interior Design, are there any other brands that you represent that might be of interest to them, that they might want to go and look at, kind of after they've seen this?
Absolutely. I think probably the most well-known one is Rocker, bathroom brand. So Rocker London Gallery, very close to Chelsea Harbour.
I was just going to say, they have that amazing showroom just right the other side of Imperial Wharf Station. It looks like it's something that's landed from another planet. It's amazing.
That's right, designed by Zaha Hadid,
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful space. We've been working with Rocker, and of course within Rocker Group there's the Laufen brand, very high-end designed bathroom and sanitary products. And both those brands are fantastic. The gallery itself is a fantastic resource for interior designers, so I'd urge anyone who's interested in interior design to go and have a look. And those brands, I mean, we're working across multiple sectors. Design and architecture is an important market for them, but also obviously kitchen and bathroom retailers, and the whole kind of heavier end, house builders, merchants. They're in lots of different spaces, so you have to attune messages to different audiences, which is a key skill of PR.
Yeah.
And I think probably the other space that I'd point students to have a look at is technology. We work with CEDIA, which is the trade body for home technology integrators. And the way that technology is infiltrating the world of interior design is increasingly important. And I think there's a number of crossover points there that are really interesting, as well as it being another membership organisation, of course.
Yeah, I mean, CEDIA, it's there are other brands out there, but the whole home cinema kind of technology and the whole smart home thing, I've seen that change considerably since I've been an interior designer. And part of what we teach at KLC, one of the things that we teach is learning about that, because you don't have to be an expert as an interior designer, but you have to know where to go and who the experts are and sort of know how to brief them. So, a company like CEDIA are fantastic because, they have representatives and they're really helpful. So yeah, that would be a really good one, I think, for interior designers to know if they're not aware already. So, I just wanted to ask you as well, this is moving sort of slightly differently, but, you've been in, as you said, in the interior design business for, a couple of decades now. And you've seen it, you've seen your company grow. So how have you seen interior design, or it's not interior design, sorry, how have you seen, PR change in that time?
It's changed massively. When I first,
you were going to say that.
Well, when I started, the main form of communication was the press release, which is, for any interior design student who's never seen or heard about what a press release is, it's effectively a 300, 400 word story that you write, and in the old days, we used to put that in an envelope with a picture that used to be a slide, as we called them, transparencies, stuck down with a bit of kind of glue with a caption beneath it. and you mailed that out in the post to the desk of a journalist that you wanted to impress. And that form of communication, the press releases are still used as a method of communication with journalists and still quite important in that respect, but you don't mail anything out. There's no sort of slide production that goes on. I mean, photography everything used to be by a professional photographer. Touching up photos used to cost a fortune. If you wanted to produce a video, well, you needed to have a budget that was in the tens of, plus 50,000 for one movie, a corporate video of a 3-minute corporate video, whereas now you can do that for under £5,000. And I think those kind of, both the process of how we do things and also the cost of how you deliver it through technology, but I mean, it's changed massively.
Yeah.
The other sort of huge area of change is that PR used to really stand for press relations, and the other part of PR is public relations. So it kind of has a double edge to it anyway in those initials. But for an agency, as we were focusing on business to business communications, it was about knowing who the media were, knowing who the important journalists were, and being able to target them with the right material. And I think now, who or what is the media? The publications, the magazines, still exist and are still part of that story. But I mean, here we are talking directly to an audience through a YouTube video. YouTube is huge. Social media, exponentially important. And I think probably the biggest change has been from the journalist being the key focus of all agencies' attention to actually thinking, well, you are the media, so communicate.
Yeah, and we can do it, directly. That it isn't such a sort of a closed door kind of secret, because the ultimate thing is about reaching the audience, and the journalists and the PR people and all of those people were the gatekeepers. So you had to get through to them first for them to get the message out. Whereas now you don't. But I guess in that sense, the other side of that is obviously, PR has changed massively. But how has it stayed the same?
Well, as I say, magazines are still important and still matter, and there's a kudos and a credibility and a value in being in the national newspapers, into those Sunday supplements, into House and Garden or Elle Decoration. Those still have value. Wallpaper, there are publications with a huge amount of credibility that are still read and valued and have brand values that are impossible to replace overnight. So there is still that importance of the relationship with journalists is still a factor, and those publications are dependent on brilliant photography still. So you need to think about how you style your shots and how you deliver photography to those publications, which actually is still important for social media. If you're looking at Instagram, for instance, sloppy posts of sloppy photos is not going to do your brand any good. And I think that still teaches you that quality matters in getting your point across. So in those areas, I think it still stayed the same. I just think it's far more democratic, far more easy to access than it ever used to be. But that doesn't necessarily make it any easier to succeed.
Yeah, well, that would lead on to my next question, which you have sort of touched on a little bit, which is, so how important is, a PR agency? How important are they, and how relevant are they for somebody, who is doing their stuff, on social media in this age of do-it-yourself promotion on social media? How, how is a PR agency relevant, and how can they, I guess, make it better?
In the days when the industry was guarded by gatekeepers, there were probably maybe 4 or 5 things that you could spend your marketing budget on. You could employ a PR agency to do media relations or public relations for you. You could advertise, you could put a brochure together or a piece of direct mail, you could produce a video. Now, I haven't got enough fingers to tell you how many things you can do. And where the really intelligent marketing or PR consultant comes in is actually being the person who can advise you what's right for you, number one, in terms of your strategic thinking, being able to match that strategy with where your business objectives are, which again takes marketing expertise to do that. And then the tactics of actually, so what are you going to spend your money on? What are you going to spend your time on? Consultancy and advice to get that all in place for you and actually to deliver it, because just because you can do it doesn't mean you've got the time to do it.
Oh, I know. It's just, that's the biggest thing. It's just, you know, finding the time to run a business, an interior design business, and, you know, to be posting on social media is just, because to do it properly, it takes time. You know, like somebody who's, say, a social influencer, you know, they're not just sitting there firing off posts. There's a lot of work that goes into creating that perfect picture, creating that perfect post. So, you know, as you say, I definitely think there is still a place for, you know, PR agencies and PR people to deliver that. Because again, I think something like social media, I think if you're over 25, it's all a bit of a, you know, what would it, whereas, you know, younger people or a company who does it as a business, who employs those younger people, they're just so much more adept at, you know, doing that. They're almost instinctive.
And I think also in this digital world, it's more important than ever to have a human connection with your audience. Events and public relations are actually important in this digital space. And I think, again, that's where a PR consultant can help. So for interior designers or for interior design practices, how you get your brand out there in front of people, how do you get a platform to talk at Decorex, to pitch yourself as an authority on something, you know, that's where a PR consultant can help you, or connect you with other events that could be useful, connect you with brands and what brands are doing from an events perspective, and just understanding that map and the rules of how those kind of worlds operate. I think, again, PR expertise is invaluable.
Yeah, because it is. I think, you know, as you said, you know, even though there's a lot more choice in terms of where you can, you know, direct your, you know, connect to your audience, there is so much choice. So how do you, you know, you can do a bit of a scattergun approach and do a little bit everywhere, but is that going to be effective? Because at the end of the day, ultimately, it's about getting business. You know, it's about getting work as an interior designer. So my next question was, say if you don't have the budget to hire a PR agency, you know, what are the best ways, do you think, to promote yourself if you're a small business or if you're starting out, and if you don't have that big budget? So is there little, you know, kind of little nuggets of advice that you can give us?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, be clear about what you are, who you're selling to, why you're doing it. I think all those kind of business fundamentals, you've got to know yourself first before you can actually confidently market yourself. So number one, big tip, know what your brand is all about. Number two, I think look at what you can do cost effectively first. And the most important part of your marketing is your website.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely. I think anything that you think about from a marketing perspective, get your website ready first, get it up to date, keep it up to date, because what you're doing with your social channels, you're actually still going to be driving people towards a point that is your website. Any marketing that you do for yourself is going to be driving traffic to your website. You want your website to look good. You want it to be up to date. And actually, it's the most important piece of media that you do. Your blog, if you're going to be blogging, it needs to be up to date. You need to be talking about interesting things that reflect on your brand. And then make sure that your social channels are pointing towards your website.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think again in this all sort of digital age, I mean, you know, a decade and a half ago, you know, the website was the thing, and it was just, that was, people spent enormous amounts of money on the website, and it was all rolling graphics and, you know, fabulous effects, and, you know, sometimes they took ages to load, and it's just, you know, you can do websites for free now. But it's interesting that you say that that's still, because you're right. If I'm looking at somebody and I think, you know, I come across them on Instagram and I think their work is interesting, I will look for a website to see more of their work. So you're right, and it is about driving, you know, everyone to that. So that's, you know, they're really good points.
Yeah, it's absolutely the core thing, and I think one other thing to think about is everything's connected. So it used to be back in the day that marketing used to be siloed off into the different things that you did and not necessarily as joined up as it is today. Now everything is connected. So just because you create a blog doesn't mean that it can't exist also in social media in some way or other. It could even live as a press release in some other publications. Making things work as hard as possible for you, because the content that you create is ultimately the value that you bring to your audience.
Yeah, and it is, and it's about value. You're completely right. So, with that in mind, and thinking about, okay, we've got somebody, you know, and you've given us those tips, and you've got somebody who doesn't have, you know, a big budget, or is, you know, just starting out. You know, what are the best social media? You know, let's say they've got the website set up, you know, with a few pics and whatever. What are the best social media channels for interior designers? And what's the best way to use them?
Instagram is huge. I've heard so many interior designers tell me that they're getting upwards of 30, 40, 50, as high as 70% of their business coming through Instagram these days, which I think, you know, if you're not on Instagram and you're not feeding Instagram and you're not looking at it creatively, you're missing out. So Instagram is massive. I think those designers that got onto Instagram in the early days and have now got tens, hundreds of thousands of followers are really reaping the dividends from that. So definitely look at what you're doing on Instagram and put your focus on that. I think the other social channel that I think is underused by interior designers is LinkedIn.
Oh, interesting.
And LinkedIn is an evolving platform that is a business-to-business platform, but it's amazing how many connections you can make through business-to-business that might lead to consumers, whether it's with the brands that you work with, brands that you represent. They've just launched a story function on LinkedIn, rather, very similar to what you get on Instagram. So it's developing and evolving as a platform that I think will offer more for interior designers in the future.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, get in there quick and start using it, because you're right, it is underutilized. Because I guess my perception of it is, you know, it's people sort of wanting to connect, looking for jobs, or you know, it's a hiring kind of tool. But you know, I think you're absolutely right. That's something that I'm definitely, it's on my list to look at. But again, it's that thing about developing all of these things, and they do take time, and you have to be authentic. You can't just sort of put any old stuff on there and just think it's going to stick, because it won't. So kind of with that in mind, so LinkedIn is a really useful one. But in terms of interior designers, are there other things outside of that box that somebody could do to sort of generate business and create interest in their brand? You know, you as a PR expert, are there any other things that somebody could be doing that doesn't necessarily involve social media?
Well, I think there's always things that you can do, and I'm a great believer, as I said earlier, in using what you have to create a human relationship with your audience. So, for example, what you're doing, Nicola, this is fantastic as a way of connecting with your audience in a totally different way using video. It's very easy to do. You know, there have been interior designers I've seen doing live chats on Instagram, which is fantastic. And that in a space where we never used social media for these things 3 months ago.
I know. Well, it's just it's funny how this is one of the things that was on my list to do for sort of quite a while, but never had the time. Whereas now you're sort of at home, you're kind of forced to do it. Not forced to do it because I do want to do it, but you're forced into a position where you can, because it's sort of kind of grab it now, because hopefully before we all know it, we'll all be back to work and too busy, and then trying to pin you down for a chat like this is going to become much harder.
And I think brands that you work with as an interior designer are all looking for useful, interesting, innovative content. So my advice to an interior designer who's got a really good brand, a really good story to say would be talk to brands that you work with and see maybe they might be interested in helping you promote what you've got to say to their audience in a live chat like this, or potentially, I don't know, a webinar or some kind of different virtual way, almost like virtual talks. Everybody's crying out for that kind of content today.
Yeah, and it's become so much not easier, but we're so much more used to it, and we're used to the sort of live, relaxed kind of feel of stuff rather than the polished, we've got a TV crew, we're kind of making a program. We're also, because we're watching stuff on the go, we're watching stuff on our phones, so there is that, the audience is much more accepting of the format, I guess, than it used to be.
Audiences are far more forgiving now than they were even 3 or 4 months ago.
3 months ago, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So listen, tell me, obviously we can't have a chat, today without mentioning the C word, coronavirus, which is, still here, it's affected all of us. How has it affected your business?
It's been a challenge. I mean, on the plus side, the industry that we're in, we can work from home, and we have worked from home. And I think probably the biggest downside has been not having that same kind of communal office space where you can hear snatches of conversation, ideas that might be somebody else's idea over there, and you just pick it up and think, actually, that's a really good idea. We can work with it over here. So that kind of communal ideas sharing, I think, has been one of the big downsides, but we're all able to work from home, and that's been great. I think it's quite challenging from a PR perspective how much of our business is around events and exhibitions.
Yeah,
so
the live stuff.
Absolutely. So, the issues with, Saloni, London Design Festival, Decorex, all of those events changing or cancelling or being virtual, that creates huge issues. And I think that's probably been one of the most challenging aspects for us, is figuring out how events become part of the new post-COVID world.
Yeah, because we're not going to want to, we're not going to want to stop meeting, because that's the thing everybody has missed the most is, contact is we've all missed people, all the people around us, and we've a lot of us have been lucky enough to have our families around us, but just that sort of human I think we've realized now more than ever how important it is and how integral it is for our well-being, even in terms of that, what we took for granted, the buzz of going, Decorex is coming up, and you'll arrange to meet people there, you'll be going to see suppliers that you'll bump into people, that you didn't know were going, and, just that kind of buzz that's around all of that. Absolutely. But with that in mind, how do you think coronavirus will change for you, how you do business, and also for the businesses that you look after going forward?
I think it's accelerated a lot of the things that were happening already. I can see that print media is finding it tough, and is probably going to find it tougher as a result of this, and probably more quickly. There was already a shift from print to digital that had been many years.
Well, it was slowly declining, wasn't it? Slowly.
It was, and I think what's happened has just made that pressure much tougher.
Yeah.
Much tougher. I think we're a business that's been built on flexibility and adaptability, and this again has accelerated a lot of the things that we were doing and thinking about. So a lot of the digital stuff that we're doing as an agency around video, around animation, around social campaigns, around the podcast, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
We are, yeah, that's coming up. Yeah.
As well, but all those things has really accelerated. I mean, I've taken the opportunity to actually deliver webinars in this lockdown period, and that's been a great learning exercise for us, as well as something of value to the clients that we work with too. So you're developing new skills, new expertise as well, and I think you can never stand still in marketing. You absolutely can never stand still. So it's been a great opportunity to take a step back, look at what you're doing, and think, yeah, we'll try that, we'll do that, we'll give that a go, and we'll invest in those areas. So it's been painful, but it's been positives.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. But I think it has forced us to sort of, me certainly, to sort of really, think, it's done, not perfect. So, just go for it, just do it. Don't wait until you've got the budget, or you've got the crew, or you've got the perfect conditions in place. Just do it. And we've been forced into sort of doing that. So, that's sort of been a positive in a way. But I guess in terms of, the brands that you look after, have you had to do, kind of coronavirus PR for them in terms of kind of managing how they need to speak to their audience, sort of like overnight?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the first few weeks in April, it was crazy, crazy. Becoming an expert on all the government initiatives that were coming out, delivering communications around all those topics, and then start of June it became the flip side of, now we're coming out of it, what advice have you got for all the audiences that you need to reach about how they're going to do business coming out of it? And so a whole avalanche of coronavirus communications has gone on that's I don't know, largely kind of unseen, I think, really, by...
Yes, But I know as a BIID member, I know at the beginning it was like, oh, what's happening with this? I wanted to know as a member, and I needed the organisation, the institute, to tell me what was happening with my membership, what was happening with, the events, what was happening with, various things. So that was all delivered. So, and kind of sort of seamlessly. So you obviously did a good job there. Because I wasn't sort of going, answer my email or whatever. But listen, tell me now, so do you have any advice? And I asked Jenny this last week, and she sort of answered from sort of her perspective, but from your perspective, working not sort of directly in the business as an interior designer or a supplier, you're sort of slightly outside, but you're kind of looking in, so you've got a good sort of perspective. So have you got any advice for interior designers starting out on their career, coronavirus specific, in the situation, or just and just generally as well?
Well, do you know what? I think actually, as we emerge from this lockdown, it's a huge opportunity. I mean, how many hours has the UK public spent at home in the last 4 months? My God! And if you're a residential designer, the actual appetite for people to reshape, redo, rezone, repurpose their living spaces. It never before has this opportunity happened on such a broad scale. And I think also, you take that out from beyond the home, workspace is going to be completely different.
Yeah.
Hospitality is going to be completely different. Education, museum spaces, they're all going to have to be rethought. And okay, that might not mean large scale interior design, but in some cases it might. And I think having to get expertise and advice on what you can do post the virus, and as we're getting into a new kind of normal, I think interior design is actually been the value of the profession has been elevated the nth degree because of this.
I think you're right, and because people are thinking about residential, in terms of residential space, they're thinking about working from home, having a dedicated working from home space or several spaces. If children are going to have to kind of study from home a little bit, more than one of you are going to have to work from home. And then if you need to self-isolate, is there, a bedroom perhaps, or a space with an ensuite bathroom that you can sort of self-isolate away from. So, and ways of, opening doors and different things where, you don't have to use your hands. So there is a whole thinking there. And then, as you say, in public spaces, it's about designing to keep people safe.
And I, in addition to all of that, I think the desire to be immersed in the great outdoors when you're in a tiny flat or in a small room, how you bring that in, that takes imagination, it takes creativity. It's not, well, I mean, here's you and I, we've got our little plants behind us, but is that going to be enough for people living at home or working from home? You really have learned to value that whole kind of biophilic design ethos that I think interior designers are experts in that, or ought to be experts in that.
Yeah. And absolutely, it's something that's kind of come to our attention, and it's become much more of a thing during this pandemic. Absolutely, in terms of how we bring nature into our inside spaces and how we have that connection with nature, because we've realized it's really important. Absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about that. So interior designers, it's a perfect opportunity because of all these changes. So how do you think the interior design industry in general will change post coronavirus? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think probably there's probably quite an interesting conversation around supply chains, and I'm sure there's been a lot of disruption if you wanted to get product, or if you want to get product quickly, where are you sourcing it from? Because I think we're all thinking a lot more locally as a result of what's happened. So it may change attitudes around sourcing. It may change attitudes around sustainability, because I think we've all seen the benefit of having fewer cars, fewer planes in the air. And I think maybe that's risen up the agenda as well, which will possibly change where interior designers think they get their products from, and how that impacts upon what they deliver in the future. And I think that would be, again, positive impacts of the virus.
Yeah.
I think probably the biggest question is going to be budgets. Will the budgets exist for people to do what they need to do or want to do? And I think that's the big unknown. We just do not have any insight into that, and how serious the economic downturn might be. So there might well end up being fewer interior design practices out there, because it might be unsustainable for the amount of work that does exist.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess we just sort of have to wait and see, really, don't we? And just kind of keep ploughing on. So listen, I want to ask you now about the Interior Design Business podcast, because I listened to it and it's really interesting, but I want you to tell me all about it.
So the Interior Design Business was something we launched back in December 2018. It's a monthly audio-only podcast, and the idea behind it was going to BIID events. You have these great evenings of conversation with room full of designers, hundreds and hundreds of designers all gathered in one place talking, and you meet lots of lovely people, you hear lots of great anecdotes and stories, and then you have to wait 6 months before the next event where similar numbers are gathered together to do the same again. And I was having conversations with a number of designers about this industry is a community. People love to hear stories from other designers, but they love to hear advice and guidance, because actually it's quite a lonely profession too. And once you emerge into practice, many people are on their own, sole practitioners. Who do you get to bounce ideas off? Who do you get those little nuggets from about how to run your business? So it felt to me, I mean, I was a big podcast fan at the time, and thought, you know what? This is a podcast. What we need to do is bring conversation into the ears of interior designers, wherever they might be. Just because you can't make a panel discussion or a party doesn't mean you should be closed off from that conversation. So I had a chat with Susie Rumbold, who I'd worked with as president of the Institute, and said, Susie, do you think this idea has legs? She said, absolutely. Can I be part of it?
Brilliant. But Susie would, she's like, oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so we came up with an initial few topics. Immediately got a listenership, which is continuing to grow, and we've been very privileged to have some great designers sharing insights, having some live event type productions as well. So we did a panel discussion at Decorex last year, and those have been incredibly popular in front of live audiences. We did a fantastic one in Glasgow where we looked at sourcing and the one of the old tea rooms, the Willow tea rooms that Macintosh designed.
Oh, fantastic.
And it was great. We had 50 designers in the room, boisterous Glaswegian audience. It was fantastic.
Yeah, but you get that, if something like that, you can kind of just be part of that. When you're listening, you get that atmosphere and you kind of feel like you're in the room.
So we're kind of creating the community in a virtual space. That's the idea, and sharing best practice, ideas, insights, stories. And it's been great fun. And we've had some fantastic guests. We've got some more lined up, even through the pandemic. We've been working on getting the program back on track. I mean, we did some COVID-19 specials, which I think was the responsible thing to do for the industry. So we stopped those kind of main monthly shows for a while, but we're now getting those back on track, and we're delighted that we're going to be having Trisha Guild in our next episode in September.
Trisha Guild, she of Designers Guild.
She of Designers Guild.
The Queen of Colour.
The Queen of Colour.
I'll listen to that. Do you know when that is on?
That will be in September. Okay. We're just fixing up the recording date at the moment. So that's how does the recording work? Are you and Susie in a studio, or are you in separate places, or where? I'm just trying to visualize where Trisha will be. Will she be in her house in Provence or Italy or wherever it is? Well, I think she'll be coming back from Italy, so she won't be there. But we're actually just discussing whether we do it remotely as we are having this conversation, so we can have that facility to record shows from different audio settings, or whether we actually might be in a socially distant kind of environment in the same room, which actually, you can work it both ways. It does feel a more relaxed and intimate conversation if you are in the same spaces, which is how we do them typically, but we'll just have to see. I mean, that's going to be great. We're planning some Decorex special shows at the moment to coincide with their virtual event in October.
So can you tell me a little bit about the Decorex one? So Decorex is going to be virtual in October.
Yeah. So
can you tell me what you're going to be doing?
Well, the seminar program will still run. The talks program will still run. So again, we're just working out a bit of the detail on how that's going to be delivered. But we're certainly going to be doing a panel discussion as part of that Decorex virtual talk series. And then we are hoping to be sitting down with somebody from Decorex to actually talk about the event, so they can share all these insights with the Decorex audience in a special audio podcast at some point in the not too distant future. So that should be coming up very soon too. And they'll obviously be able to give you lots more detail on how you can interact with the event.
Yeah, how you can join. Yeah, and have you got something coming up at ROCA?
Yes, so last year we held our first anniversary Christmas party with Marianne Shillingford and Karen Haller talking about colour, which was one of my favourite shows from the last series. And we've tentatively got the 3rd of December booked at the gallery again to do another live event. It's all dependent on where we are with the pandemic. But hopefully that will come off and we can create an environment where people can get together, because I think we've all missed that, and it would be lovely if the time and the space and the situation with what we're all living through allows us to do that.
Yeah.
So make a date. 3rd of December should
Yeah,
be a big do going
fingers
on at the
crossed.
gallery.
So listen, tell me just about the Interior Design Business podcast. So how can people like tune in? How can they access it?
I think the easiest thing to do is to find us on Instagram, the Interior Design Business Podcast, and the link in our bio will immediately take you to the show, whether you've got an iPhone, you've got an Apple Podcasts app on your iPhone, which basically it will click through to that. If you've got a Samsung or an Android phone, it'll take you through to whatever the podcast platform is that Google uses.
Okay.
So, or whether you're on your desktop, again, just click on the link and it'll take you to the preferred format for desktop. And honestly, find us on Instagram, click that,
okay,
and you're
so
away.
Instagram is the sort of the kind of easiest way, and then it'll just take you. Brilliant. Fantastic. So listen, tell me as well, I know we spoke earlier about some kind of little PR advice for interior designers, but can you give me 3 quick PR takeaways? I'm squeezing you now for your expertise. 3 PR takeaways for my audience, for my interior designers, or even anyone who's got a small business, who's a sole trader working on their own, that they could implement in their business right now.
So I think number 1 is be clear about your brand. Be clear about your brand and understand what it is you are about and what you're trying to sell, and then communicate that in every platform that you possibly can, as many as you've got the time to do. Okay, number 1. Number 2, connect. People buy from people, and I think it's super, super, super important, even in this hugely digitized world, that you are making the most of your networks. And networks breed business, and whether that's on social media or whether that's in your local area, look at where you're connecting, where are your customers going, and connect with them too in those spaces. Number 3, I think be yourself, be authentic. Don't make it up. Don't try and be something you're not. You have to be real to succeed, even in this virtual space. Otherwise, you will get found out.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. So listen, I'm going to hopefully people watching this will take that on board and find that really useful. So we're going to finish up now, Jeff. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, but I do have one more question before we finish, which is sort of 2 in 1, but you personally, what have you missed most during lockdown, and what have you enjoyed doing?
The things that I've missed most, or the thing I've missed most, is I think it's that community. Being part of my life is connecting with people, and it's been really great to be able to do it over Zoom, but it ain't the same, and it's so much more tiring, and it's so much more personal and brilliant to be in the same room and talking with people, and I've missed that hugely. Yeah. The thing that's been greatest has been, so just before lockdown, in fact just before Christmas, we got a puppy, and the puppy is a mini dachshund called Libby, at Libby Von Crum on Instagram. And she has had a blast in lockdown because we've been here, the family's been all around her. She thinks this is the normal, that we just take her for walks all the time, that we have her just, sitting on our lap, sitting down, being asleep. It's just great.
She's not there sitting on your lap at the moment, is she?
She is not sitting on my lap. She's in the other room because she can be
a shame.
Annoying. Would you like me to go and get her so
yes,
I can just
please. Go? Yes,
okay.
Please.
Wait there.
Okay.
She was actually asleep on my wife's lap.
Oh, look, you've got her wrapped up in a blanket. Oh, hello, Libby. Hello. She's like, what's all this? How old is she now?
She's 9 months now.
Oh, and I just, you can't imagine life without her. Look at you, you're beaming. You just love her so much.
She's gorgeous.
Do you take her to work with you?
Yeah, she did come to the office with us, and yeah, I mean, she was great. We've got some great video of her actually in a drawer, you know, having a sleep.
Sleeping. Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for introducing us to Libby. I think she stole the show there. And take care. And hopefully I will see you at an event soon.
Can't wait, Nicola. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, pleasure. All right. Take care.